Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, May 7th, and for the Toronto Blue Jays, the April showers have not brought May flowers as of yet. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, the Blue Jays have now lost 4 straight series. They just lost to the Washington Nationals. How are you feeling?
It's been a difficult few weeks, to say the least, for the Toronto Blue Jays, and the best way I could describe how I'm feeling right now is that my hand it's hovering over the panic button, and I'm about 30 seconds, probably less, from just smashing that thing, because this team looks absolutely dreadful, and I don't even know where you go from here.
Well, they are 16-19 per Fangraphs. They have a 25.5% chance of making the playoffs, which I actually feel is pretty optimistic for a last place team in the division. And they are, I think it's the 4th worst team in the American League.
I'm befuddled. I mean, we knew that this team had a limited ceiling going into the season, I think. I mean, there was all this talk over the offseason that they didn't improve on a core that disappointed last year, but they still won 89 games, and this team looks like it would be lucky to win 80.
I'm probably not like on the lucky to win 80, but I mean, I feel like they're basically just like a 500 team.
They look
Unless
terrible. No, I disagree. They looked. What about this team is redeeming right now? We talked about it right before we hit the record button, and you were kind of like, "We'll save it." I don't know if we just want to get into it now. What is there to be optimistic about this team? The pitching has regressed immensely. The hitting has not in any way, shape, or form looked better. It's basically Davis Schneider and Danny Jansen, and nobody else has done anything. Justin Turner has been good, but he's slowly coming back to earth. This team has nothing. Yeah, they're signing Aaron Sanchez to save the season. I'm sorry, this is a team that's rudderless.
I mean, like, it's funny because we've had the conversation the whole time where it's like, you got to be patient, like the offense will come, blah, 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 whatever. Same thing that we said last year. And I guess the offense has come a little bit. Like, at least they started scoring runs against the Nationals. But I mean, like, congrats for doing the bare minimum. Like it's not a huge achievement to score 8 runs in a game where the team makes 3 errors and gives you 5 unearned runs. Like it against good teams, that's 3 runs, right? Like and when you got Alek Manoah on the mound, 3 earned runs probably isn't going to do it. And the way that the bullpen has been, that's also probably not going to get it done. But I it's hard because there is so much talent on the roster, and like again, we've sat here for so long and been like, what is this team, blah blah blah. Like we feel like there's so much talent there and they should be better than they are, but at some point the patience does have to wear off. And I mean, for me, probably sitting here, like I feel that there is more in there for everybody. I mean, Bo, I'm not necessarily going to say there's more in there for Springer. I think he's looked, I don't want to say cooked, but
I
I'm
don't. He's
very,
got a WRC plus in the low 70s. I think cooked is a pretty fair description of a mid 30s outfielder that has basically lost his touch with the bat, and defensively is a corner outfielder, albeit a good one at that, but still not going to be hitting enough to be a regular everyday player. The Blue Jays just lack the talent to make up for investing $20+ million in the corpse of George Springer.
I
And
mean,
that's not the only misstep that this team clearly is dealing with. Guerrero obviously is his own bag of fun. Bo Bichette, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, still hasn't turned a corner and is starting to slip down the batting order. You've got guys like, again, another guy, Alejandro Kirk, coming into the year. You're hoping for some positive progression on him. Of course, that goes nowhere. I mean, I could go around the diamond and just kind of express my frustration with probably 1 through 9, except for maybe 1 or 2 guys. Like I said, it's just there might not be a single player on this team that I feel is capable of being a the best player on a playoff team.
I mean, like if you think about this team right now and you're thinking about not necessarily like building for the future, but like putting together a roster in 3 years, right? And you have to choose who you want to be here. Obviously, I I don't know if we want to have like the rebuild talk because I don't think that they will. Like they'll probably be close enough all year where they at least convince themselves that they're in it to go for it, especially the way the team is built. Like, I mean, I don't really see them trading Yusei Kikuchi or Jimmy Garcia or Danny Jansen or even Vlad and Bo at this point. But I mean, when you look at like the guys who you're like, yeah, that guy I would be fine with being here and like you think he could be part of a winning team. I mean, outside of Vlad and Bo, like just put them to the side. But I mean that's Davis Schneider probably. That's Jansen. Like you think Jansen would be part of like the next great Blue Jays team because even him, he's in his late 20s, and if you do kind of have to go in a different direction, then he probably doesn't fit age wise. Ernie Clement, same thing. Like he's older. I guess Varsho you can put in that group. Like his WRC plus is hanging around 130, which is really encouraging. I mean, what more can you ask from him at this point? But it's not like, the home run streak was really nice for him, like the hot like 6 and 10 days or whatever, but he hasn't hit a home run outside of those 10 days. So I don't know how you feel about we can get into the Ken Rosenthal thing if you want, where he's like basically saying they got to start winning or else they're going to be selling.
Well, here's the quote because I just pulled it up as you mentioned it here. Here's the full block from Ken Rosenthal on a reckoning coming for the Blue Jays. Firing the manager would be an option, except the Jays already tried that in July 2022, replacing Charlie Montoya with John Schneider. Selling, meanwhile, would be a concession that team president Mark Shapiro signed through 2025 and general manager Ross Atkins through 2026 have essentially failed at their jobs. The Jays then will not give up on the season easily, but they have yet to sign Bo Bichette, which we know, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. to long-term deals. It might not even want Guerrero on such a deal at this point, as we've mentioned numerous times. Their free agents after the season include Yusei Kikuchi, Justin Turner, Kevin Kiermaier, and Danny Jansen, mostly complementary parts. Sidebar, those guys are some of the most substantial contributors on the team this year. They're not complementary pieces this time around. I digress. But they're free agents after 2025. Who boy? Chris Bassett, Bichette, and Guerrero, Jordan Romano, and a number of other relievers. As mentioned, a reckoning is nearly at hand. This is a team that is nearing the end of its window by all accounts, I would say. So at what point do you look at all the free agents coming up? And I mean, listen, we just rhymed off four dudes that are gonna have some pretty nice value come July. To me, this is a core that has failed. And listen, also as Rosenthal mentioned, Shapiro's through 2025, Atkins is through 2026. Their clock is running up. The Renos are done. I mean, this
I
front
thought
office
Atkins
might even be
I thought
in the
Atkins
midst.
was done after this year.
Rosenthal says 2026, Shapiro 2025 on this. So, I mean, regardless, like their clocks are ticking too. It's 2 and 3 years. And it's not like teams don't fire general managers in the middle of their contracts.
Yes. I mean, also, so the trade deadline is 3 months away at this point. I think uh it's like August 1st all the time, right? So um I mean, I'm just looking at like the rest of their schedule this month. And you go Phillies, Twins, one of the hottest teams in baseball, Orioles, Rays who are also struggling, and then you go White Sox, Tigers, White Sox, Pirates. What? So the White Sox, Tigers, White Sox, Pirates. I mean, not like the Pirates and Tigers have been necessarily bad either. I mean, the Tigers are above 500 and the Pirates are about in the same boat as the Blue Jays. But so that's three tough series and then the Rays. What do you think that they need to do over these next three series to Like you think if they play 500 ball until then and then like kind of are able to climb back against some of the worst competition, like they've had a pretty tough schedule so far, to be fair. But I don't think that's really an excuse when you need to be beating good teams anyways.
Yeah, no, what they need to do is win. I don't really think it's as any more complicated than that. This is a team right now that's not winning baseball games in any type of meaningful capacity. They're under 500 for a team whose hope was to be division winners or in the mix. I mean, this team doesn't look like it's going to be competing with the Yankees or the Orioles or even the Red Sox for that matter, if we're talking about the American League East. So right now we're talking about the wild card. And even at that, that still feels like a stretch at this point. And again, that stretch at the end of this month or in the next few weeks, when you do get a couple of softer opponents, in theory, a couple of Central Division teams, hopefully you're able to pick up wins. But we just saw the Blue Jays lose a series to the Washington Nationals. I don't know about you. I'm not comfortable putting any of those series, save for maybe the White Sox, in the bank.
I think the White Sox are like the worst team ever that I've ever seen.
They're pretty bad. So, I mean, basically anything short of 5 out of 6 there. I'm not sure if it's a 2-3 game sets, but
It
assuming
is.
it
It
is,
is. Yeah.
you basically get one game in there of leeway. But again, great. So you've won a couple games in that 6 game stretch, you know, sandwiched between, I think it was the Tigers, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, that's great and all. But then you move on to June and you're not going to get the White Sox again. Like it's going to get tougher. This is a team in the American League East, and even with a balanced schedule, you're still going to be battling it out for placement in your division with 3 exceptional teams, or at least really good teams. Plus, I don't know about you, but even though the Tampa Bay Rays are kind of in the same spot as the Blue Jays right now, I have a lot more faith in the Rays finding it than I do the Blue Jays.
It's kind of funny to look because even heading into the National Series, I was kind of like, the Nationals are kind of frisky. Like they're not awful. They were pretty awful in this series, not gonna lie. Like it's not like they really impressed me that much. What they did well in the series is they hit home runs at good times. They did not play good defense. They didn't really pitch that well. Um, but they did what the Blue Jays couldn't, which was hit home runs at big times and get some extra base hits. And we can get into the Manoah start because we haven't talked about it yet. Obviously, he gets called up after his great AAA start, which do you think that they rushed him up?
I mean, the pitching depth, they talked about it on the broadcast. The pitching depth has evaporated.
Yeah.
Parsons no longer in the organization. Mitch White no longer in the organization. Ricky Tiedemann is hurt. This is a team that needed Alek Manoah to go out there and be a 5th starter. Not even be good. Not even be 2022 Alek Manoah. Keegan Matheson on Blue Jays Talk, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever it may have been, basically said it that 2022 Alek Manoah has vanished into thin air. And right now, they just need him to be a very boring number 5. And nothing about that start was particularly boring for Alek Manoah. It was him dancing in and out of trouble, even in the first inning. I was watching that game very closely because of work. And that first inning was chaotic. He almost got killed in that inning, but he somehow dances around it. And then the second inning again, he danced around trouble until finally you get into the middle innings and he finally got burned. And then, of course, you turn to the bullpen and, listen, they had a 6-1 lead at one point. This is not acceptable when you're facing the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because he like Manoah threw three, gave up 2 runs through three, and I thought that he looked better than having given up 2 runs through three. Like the first 3 innings, I thought obviously he had 6 Ks through those 3 innings, right? And he got hurt by the home run and the Bo error in the first inning. And of course, I mean everything that happened after the error wasn't that great. Obviously, he struck out the side in however you want to look at it, but like they in that fourth inning, I couldn't believe that they left him out there. Like it was, I mean, I get that he did have two outs, but it just you didn't feel like he was going to get anybody out. And that Winker at bat where Winker hit the go ahead home run, I mean, you could see that coming a mile away. And like, sure, I agree that the stuff looked sharper than it did last year, but the command was just so bad. Like he was leaving stuff hanging. And I mean, even if you look at his last AAA start where he had the 12 Ks and had like the great results, like I don't think that his like command looked impeccable in that start either, right? Like he was getting a lot of chases on like the back foot slider in that start, and he was locating the front hip sinker to lefties, so he was getting some called strikes there. But I think he looked awful to righties, and like it's I don't know. I know that they needed him to come up, but I feel like you almost needed some more proof of concept from him in AAA, right? Like give him at least one more start to prove it that he was ready to come pitch in the major league level. Like Paolo Espino could have gone out there and given you 4 innings of 7 run baseball. You know, like I don't think that you needed to see Manoah that badly based on that AAA start.
I just don't see what the plan would have. I mean, do you really want to toss out with Espino? You know, you're conceding the game with Manoah. In theory, he's coming off of this great outing against Indianapolis, and you're hoping maybe there's something to build on there. So again, like the upside at this point with Manoah, who even knows at this point? Like I was talking with someone, if it came down to a roster crunch where they were at 40 dudes and like is Manoah, he's not the first guy you DFA, but he's pretty close to the bottom of that list, I think. Like you've got Brennan Little ahead of him. You got Paulo Espino in theory ahead of him.
Joey Kunal's on the 40 man now.
But I mean, we're talking maybe 4 or 5 pitchers tops, and that even feels generous in terms of the guys that, if it came down to it, you might have to like listen. Manoah still has plenty of options, and he's still, as far as I'm aware, is still pre-arb because he didn't hit the Super 2 last year. So this is a guy right now that's org depth. He is a Brennan Little. He is a Paulo Espino. And if you're going to toss him out there at this point, clearly he's going to give you 4 innings of 5 runs, 6 runs, 7 run ball.
I just think if you erase the track record for him, the 2022, the 2023, whatever, and you just looked at what he had done in his stint as a minor leaguer to start this year, like yes, the start against Indianapolis was great, but the other 4 starts in the minor leagues have not been worthy of a call up. You know, like to me, if he was Joe Schmo, not Alek Manoah, well, for one, he wouldn't be pitching in AAA based on the stats. But another thing, like there's no way that they would have called him up after that one start.
And it's kind of, they've just had their hand kind of forced by injuries. I didn't even mention him, Yariel Rodriguez on the injured list. So this is
Yeah.
a team that just needed a body, and Manoah kind of got plucked. But to me, I mean, Yariel Rodriguez comes back and Manoah's right back to AAA. And if he throws a temper tantrum this year, because a lot of people kind of forgetting, didn't report to AAA last year, fought with the organization. If he's going to do that again this year, what's the plan? Like, this is a guy clearly that is motivated to succeed, but whatever it may be, his body, his mind, whatever it is, has failed him. And he's no longer the guy that he once was.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at like the roster depth or like the starting pitchers in AAA, and obviously there's like nobody there. Chad Dallas was somebody who in spring training you look at and you're like, yeah, I could maybe see him like forcing his way up on into the major leagues at some point, like, or at least establishing himself as major league depth. But he's also been awful this year in Buffalo, which is really unfortunate. But they literally have nothing, as obviously shown by the Aaron Sanchez signing. But if one of their main four, like the Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, or Gosman, like actually got hurt at this point, like what are you doing? I mean, even Bowden Francis at this point, of course, if they needed to, he would be your fifth starter. But it's not like he had shown you much as a fifth starter, anyways. So is Aaron Sanchez like the next guy up at this point? Are you bringing back Mitch White off of waivers because the Giants had to let him go because he'd been so bad?
There's no options here. It's kind of incredible how the pitching went last year from so exceptional to unbelievably, and we haven't even really talked about the bullpen, which Eric Swanson is broken. And you recognize that there were some really difficult circumstances to begin his spring training, and he basically lost spring. So, like, it's hard to even really fault him. But even a guy like Romano, like, he hasn't looked like himself. Tim Mesa, we talked about at length over the last couple of episodes about how he was struggling, continues to really be a non-factor. This is a bullpen that lacks anything resembling the strength it did coming into the season and even last year. And you're really quickly running out of options for arms.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Garcia being hurt has been like almost the worst thing that could have happened to this bullpen because like they needed him on Sunday. And I wonder like if they win that game, if he is available. Like maybe not, but the fact that in a game where you're within a run or two until kind of the end there, and you're going Nate Pearson, Yenesis Cabrera, Eric Swanson, Zach Pop, like it's not good enough to be honest for the bullpen that is supposed to be one of the best in the majors. And now if I'm correct, it is the worst bullpen by ERA in baseball.
It's definitely among them. I don't know if I don't have the number in front of me, but it's among the worst, undoubtedly. I mean, 2 days ago, I'll see if I can find
It is 30th by ERA in baseball.
exactly right. And I mean, let me see if I can find it. They showed this on the broadcast a few days ago, and this is out of date. You mentioned the ERA is now in dead last. Ks per nine, and this is again 2 to 3 days ago. They were 26th, they were 29th in homers, and they were dead last in OPS against. So everything was going wrong. They were getting hammered, and they weren't missing bats.
Yeah, they're giving up a lot of home runs, obviously. I mean, the Swanson stuff, yeah, it's really tough, like you mentioned. Like, I'm fine with giving him like the benefit of the doubt because he was so good last year, and I can't even fathom like having to go through what he went through in spring training and then having to fly to across the US to Buffalo, to Toronto, to Dunedin as he's trying to rehab while dealing with that and trying to make it back to the major league. Like I'm fine with leaving, like not making any grand statements about Eric Swanson and where he's at. But I mean, the fact that we're back with like the Nate Pearson thing after he looked good, but then they send him down and he comes back and he's absolutely not been the same pitcher. And Genesis Cabrera, who we've talked about, where like I'm not gonna say that I'm shocked that he hasn't been that great based on what he was before the 20 whatever innings he threw with the Blue Jays last year. Like right now he has as many strikeouts as he does walks, and he's giving up over 2 home runs per nine.
All right, so I'm just gonna ask the question: when is the blow up happen? When do you do it? Because you seem so gung ho about it's early. I mean, relative to me, I just started the episode with I'm going to slam the panic button. I'm hovering over the panic button, so to speak, the nuclear option. And I think I'm ready to blow it up as early as 2 weeks from now. I think if you get to mid-May, I mean, we just saw the Marlins pull the plug on how their season's going. And I mean, listen, the Blue Jays are not the Miami Marlins, but you want to talk about trajectory in your window. We just talked about everybody is a free agent in the next 2 years. So, you know, shrinking, it's closing. When do
So
you pull the plug?
So here's the thing. Their next 8 games against the Phillies, Twins, and Orioles, I think like I don't think it would like completely end their year, but I mean if you go 2-6 in those games, which I think is a possibility because the Phillies are maybe the best team in baseball. Sorry, they're not the best team in baseball. The Dodgers are pretty
The
freaking good,
Phillies
but the
are
Phillies,
ripping hot.
yeah, like they're rolling right now. They do have the best record in baseball. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see them take 2 from the Blue Jays here in the 2-game series. The Twins are super hot, and of course the Orioles, who the Blue Jays will see for the first time this year, and they are the AL East leaders right now. But I mean, if you go 2-6 over the next 8, yikes! Like that's probably to me, if you're 18 and 25, that's probably getting close to it's over territory, I would say. And obviously, like you could go 2-6, and then rip off a ton of wins against the White Sox and Tigers and Rays and Pirates and whatever. But I think that what they've shown you so far, and again, it's May, so how you play in April doesn't really matter in September, but you still have to make the playoffs, right? So like you can get super hot and play really well, but if you dig yourself that hole, then it's going to be tough for them to really come back from that, especially with so many good teams ahead of them, right? For them right now to even make the playoffs, you would have to pass some combination of the Orioles, Yankees, Red Sox, Rays, Guardians, Twins, Royals, Tigers, Rangers, Mariners, and Athletics.
It's
And that's not easy to do. But here's my question to you. So I know like you say that you're ready to blow it up, right? But for this front office, I feel like they would fight tooth and nail to avoid kind of blowing this up, especially when you're you're not complete like you're not eliminated, right? There's a world where they come back and are like super hot in September and pushing for the playoffs again. But for you seeing this front office, do you think that it's more likely that they go the opposite way of blowing it up and try? I mean, obviously you don't have the farm system, but they say screw it and just start trading everything they can for whoever to try and add to this team.
That's not how they've ever they showed up and scolded Alex Anthopoulos for doing exactly that, right? The Blue Jays in 2015 were a roughly 500 team, obviously with a much better run differential than that would have indicated. And Alex Anthopoulos goes all in and trades away Jeff Hoffman, who was the previous year's their ninth overall pick, their first pick, and they traded away Daniel Norris, who was, I think, their best or second best pitching prospect, and they traded away Miguel Castro, who was a guy that at the time had been one of their high leverage relievers to start the season, was just 19 or 20, like, and they got here and they scolded him for doing that. So to me, for Mark Shapiro to give Ross Atkins the go ahead to say, hey, go ahead and push in the chips when they don't seem to be interested in doing that, even this offseason, all the talk about going out and adding a bat. Listen, there isn't probably a single bat other than Shohei Ohtani that has lived up to expectations outside of maybe Justin Turner. But again, this is a team that's had opportunities to go all in, so to speak, and push in their chips. And they have not done that. Not once. They traded for Whit Merrifield a few years back, right? And that was their big splash. Have they made a trade acquisition splash more substantial than that? Am I forgetting one? The Varsho trade was big, but that might be their biggest trade. And it's still Dalton Varsho, right? I mean, I remember at the time of the trade, I was like, this is it. It's just Dalton Varsho. And in some ways, I've been proven right. In some ways, I've been proven wrong. This is not a team that's open to trading away guys that have team control for better players with less team control. Now, I wanted to bring this up before we got too far
Just
away
just
from
just let
it.
me make a point before you
Okay,
go
go
here.
ahead.
So
Go ahead.
my point in asking that is if their jobs are on the line based on this season, like You don't think that there's a level of screw it from them where they're, they know that if this team doesn't make the playoffs and we don't have any of these guys extended past next year, that they're not going to be Toronto Blue Jays for that much longer, that they wouldn't say, "Hey, let's trade Ricky Tiedemann for I don't even know who you like, let's trade Ricky Tiedemann for Alex Bregman or whatever, like because the Astros have been so bad, and you like you try and go all in that way. Like you don't think that their situation changing would change their desperation.
It should. I just don't think it would. I think it would be antithetical to the way they've operated the team over the past 7, 8 years, whatever it may be, right? That's just not how this front office builds a baseball team. They might sign Alex Bregman in the winter. I mean, Bregman hasn't even been really all that great to start the year, if I recall correctly. So, I mean, and the Jays certainly won't be the only suitor for them. Plus, they're pushing one of their highest payrolls in franchise history at this rate, right? So, how much room do they have to add when they're staring down the barrel of a losing season, or at best maybe a roughly 500 one? Now, again, here's what I was going to say. Like, you want to talk best case scenario, this team is World Series contender, and we're so many eons from that. But I was just looking this up because they just played the Washington Nationals, and of course in 2019 the Nationals famously were horrendous to start the year and came all the way back to win the World Series. So they were 19 and 31 to start 2019 before they turned it around. So there is maybe some room for the Blue Jays to be better, to wiggle, to keep losing, keep winning, to stay steady the course, right? So again, I'm still in the camp that I don't see this as a team that's capable of reaching those heights, so to speak. And I think that's also in large part, you think about, the divisions that those two teams are playing in. The the NL East in 2019, I don't remember it exactly, but the Braves, from what I recall, still rebuilding. The Mets were not owned by Steve Cohen. Like that was not the same National League East that it is today with the money and the juggernauts. The Jays are in a powerhouse AL East. And I just don't see a universe where things get to that point and you're able to claw your way out of it.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think looking at that Nationals team, I mean, I just pulled the standings up here and they had to pass the Mets. Well, I mean, obviously they didn't pass all these teams, but here's where the teams that were ahead of them, and it was Mets, Braves, Phillies, Cubs, Brewers, Pirates, Cardinals, Cincinnati Reds, uh, Giants, Rockies, Diamondbacks, Padres, Dodgers. So like pretty crazy that they came back to do that. But I mean, like you have how much more confident do you feel in that version of Anthony Rendon, Juan Soto, Trey Turner?
Well, like listen to the names you're rhyming off here, right? Who do the Blue Jays have that can match that? There's Bo Bichette, who's in the dumps and in theory shows up, but there's Vlad, who's a league average first baseman right now. If that, there isn't a Juan Soto on the horizon. There isn't a Trey Turner on the horizon. There isn't an Anthony Rendon pre I don't like baseball on the horizon.
Uh,
It's
I'm
just not
just
happening.
I'm just looking
Unless
at like
unless
their
Arelvis Martinez is somehow some kind of generational talent that we've all been missing, no one's on the horizon.
like I'm just looking at their stats like through the beginning of that 2019 year, and Rendon had a 169 WRC plus. Soto had a 124. Turner had a 94, but he only ended the year with like a 111. So it's not like all of those guys were underperforming to the level of the Blue Jays and then like picked it up, which is kind of what you would see for the Blue Jays, like kind of coming back is where like all these guys underperforming, like significantly pick up their level of play. And for the Nationals, I mean, like that's probably more. on their pitching that year, where you kind of look at those guys. Like, if I can get this to work here, but I mean, I'm sure that they're like the Strasburg, Scherzer, Corbin, like I'm sure that they completely reversed their level of play that year, where the Blue Jays, well, I guess, yeah, like Scherzer had a 3.7 early in the year, Strasburg 3.3, Corbin 3.25. So I mean, obviously they all improved a little bit, but like you look at that, and for the Blue Jays, like to me, looking at this Blue Jays team, the pitching, the bullpen probably should be a little bit better when you get like a little bit better health and whatever. But even that's not a guarantee, I would say. The starting pitching looks primed for some regression from Barrios. Like even Gossman's been a little bit over his skis. Yariel had pitched better than the peripherals suggest. Chris Bassett, like he's been pretty in line with his peripherals, which aren't great. And I think that it's the defense plays a part in that, but there's also a little bit of luck, especially with a guy like Jose Barrios who has a 0.82 home runs per night when he's been giving up a ton of hard contact. So when you look at this team, like the offense should ideally get better, but we've also seen a lot of like Vlad underperforming his ex-Woba, right? So there's at
We've
least,
seen this story though,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah. I'm curious for like Springer because we're gonna learn a ton about him when the bat tracking stuff from Baseball Savant gets released in a couple weeks. But I think the eye test probably says enough about him.
I mean, I I wish I had the chart in front of me, but basically it said once you hit 30, obviously
Yeah,
it's a sharp decline. And I think at like 34, I think it was like half of your peak talent, so to speak, right? And I mean, how old is George Springer? He's 33, 34. He's got to be right there.
it's 34.
He's 34. He's approaching the end of his life cycle, so to speak, in terms of his bat speed. And I mean, I think that's probably a substantial part of why he struggled. The ability to, so to speak, command the zone. His eye still looks like it's fine. He's been walking at a decent clip. He spent the whole first bit of the season basically not chasing, but it's that he can't generate any power.
Yeah. What do you make of the lineup stuff? Because they move Bo down, but they seem pretty stuck at having, Springer lead off. Like where are you on wanting to see a lineup change?
I think we're so far past it. I mean, the problem I think is who's leading off? What, Davis Schneider? Kevin Biggio, he's not even really playing anymore because Schneider's been so much better. You put in Bo Bichette in that spot, he's not putting up numbers. You're not putting him to lead off. You don't have an on base leadoff guy that you can slot in there, do you?
I guess Schneider. I think Schneider is probably the best option they have. Like as far
But
as like he's got a 372 OBP, which is the best on the team outside of Danny Jansen, who's played 13 games. And like at least he walks a lot and is an above average hitter at this point. Like I mean, I just don't know. Like Springer's hitting 205 with a 279 OBP. Like
that's
I
that's
just
not even everyday player level.
I just it to me, like obviously these are major league baseball players, and there's some things that we're just not going to know about the way that the manager operates based on a, a million factors. But the fact that we just have seen like the such a reluctance to make changes like that is so weird to me, and I wish that I knew the reasoning, because like Springer is not an everyday player right now. And the fact that they keep giving him the most plate appearances on the team, like it's not going to magically flip a switch at this point, right? Like he maybe needs some time, like a different approach. Like you don't need to put him in the leadoff spot every day. Like I don't care about his home run record, to be honest. Like he's second, and he's probably not catching Ricky Henderson. So, like, why is he leading off? Is it something that is it because he's going to be upset about it? Is it because you feel like you don't have anybody else? But I just don't understand like the total reluctance to try something different when things aren't working.
I'm genuinely at a loss for words. I just think that for someone that does a podcast, never something you really want to be saying, but like, what else is there to really say? This is not a team right now as constructed that looks like it's legitimate. Like that looks like it's gonna do anything.
Yeah, I mean, it you at least last year you could kind of look at like some of the numbers offensively and be like, hey, I can kind of you can at least see a world where like things like there's numbers that say that it should be coming, right? This year they are lacking that. I mean, when you look at, I'm just going to use Woba and ex Woba here, but who on the Blue Jays are underperforming their ex Woba? Danny Jansen overperforming, Davis Schneider overperforming. I mean, but like these are overperforming by like not very much, but still overperforming. Justin Turner overperforming, Vlad underperforming, Biggio overperforming, Varsho overperforming, IKF underperforming. IKF is a 341 xWOBA, which is I is a, that's cool. I I still don't know how to feel about him. Ernie Clement is underperforming. Kirk underperforming, but his xWOBA is still 296. Springer
I mean, you're
underperforming.
getting into kind of the dregs of it here. Like this is not
The only player
these are
who's like
not good players.
the only player who is substantially underperforming, or I guess the only two players who are substantially underperforming their xWOBAs are Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. And
Shocked, I tell you, shocked about Vlad.
Vladdy has given us a significant enough sample size of like underperforming xWOBA where I'm not 100% sure whether that's going to turn.
I wish I had an answer. And you know what? We're not paid to have the answers. You know, guys like Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are, and they just don't. There's no answers here. I don't know if you got to fire the manager. I don't know if you've got to shake things up. I just don't see John Schneider to me. Job security should be negligible, if that.
I
So,
mean, like I
but what is that going to do?
here, yeah. I mean, it's funny because like people are like, oh, you don't want to like make change for the sake of making change, but sometimes you just got to make change for the sake of making change. And whether that is the fact that the hitting guys have survived this long. Like I remember in 2022 when they got out to the slow start offensively, and I was kind of like, hey, maybe you should fire the hitting coach, just get a different voice in there. And now we're on year 3 of the offense not living up to its potential. I mean, obviously they turned it around in 2022 and still ended up as one of the best offenses. But whatever has gone on as far as like the philosophy change into becoming the Cleveland Guardians, you got to get rid of that. Like, come on, man. It's ridiculous at this point.
It's not working. It's just not working.
And even the Guardians have changed the way that they operate. They're looking to hit for power now, and oh man, it's so frustrating just to know like where things have gone. I'm just looking here at where's the Blue Jays rank as far as like some of the offensive power numbers. Like ISO, they are where are they here? They're 21st. So I mean it's not good. Like 21st, it's you're basically happy that you're not last if you're 21st. So slugging, they're 23rd. I'm like, what do you even say about the offense at this point?
Exactly. And the pitching now no longer is picking them up and saving their bacon. The hitting's no good. The pitching's no good. As I mentioned, a reckoning seems like it's maybe coming.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess, how it turns. There's you know, like the tough schedule ahead. I mean, what do you make of this two set series against the Phillies?
Hope to win one. Try not to get the pants blown off you and in either game. Like this is a mismatch. And, it's 2 games and 162 game sample size. So, as with every series, you're not going to read into the minutia too deeply. But would you be any surprised that the Phillies walked in and walked out with a 6-1 and an 8-1 win type of situation? Like this is about as big a mismatch as I can think right now in terms of who the Blue
Vibes.
Jays could be facing. Like just vibes, just
Is there
everything.
is there a worse vibe matchup than the Philadelphia Phillies and the Toronto Blue Jays right now? I
Only
mean,
the Toronto Maple Leafs and Boston Bruins, but I digress.
I mean, you wanna if you wanna go the second half emergency Leafs elimination pod. I guess like you look at it and like you're happy you're not facing Zach Wheeler, I guess is one positive from the week.
Take what you can get. Take what you can get.
You will certainly take what you can get at this point. We'll see. I mean, they got to turn it around, or else I personally don't see them really going into a total blow it up at this point. I think that's maybe an off-season thing, but we'll see. There's still so much to learn about the team, and they've shown us quite a bit over the last calendar year, though. So we'll see. But yeah, we're gonna run. So that will do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure you drop a follow or review wherever you get your pods. You can follow us on YouTube at Bird's Eye View Pod. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe there. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the games.